Okay. Just going to check the bit rate and make sure we're all good here. Okay, seems pretty steady. Let's get started. Um, so there's been a fair bit going on since we did a stream last. It would have been just over a week ago. Um, and we kind of left it so long because we were having a it became a bit of a mess, to be honest, especially at the beginning, after kind of day 2 and 3, the information environment around what's happening in Ukraine was pretty chaotic, to say the least. Um, so what's been going on? I don't know, there's been a fair bit happening, both on the ground and in the media. It seems that Russia's kind of been making some pretty epic territorial gains. Um, and there's also been massive sanctions placed on Russia by everyone in the West in almost every facet of um, life, from business to entertainment, money, you name it, it's happened. So, what does this mean for the media environment? Well, we've got a media environment now that is even more hazy than it was on the first day. If you remember from a week ago, it was possible to kind of look at some of the raw footage that we were seeing and piece things together. We did a few little exercises where we looked at that, and we could kind of verify some of the footage and have a bit of an idea about what was happening pretty much in real time. Um, Now you can that can still be done at the moment. However, things are kind of it's difficult. Um, there are two pretty polarized narratives that are happening here. You've got um, the Western narrative and the stuff coming from Russia. So we may as well have a bit of a look at that. We haven't really touched on Reddit yet, so this will be the first time we have a bit of a gaze at that. So let's go to Reddit and see what's happening in some of the subreddits there, especially around what's happening in Ukraine. And then we'll do our normal start where we kind of have a bit of a flick through different channels. And then I've actually got some examples that I've been storing up over the last week where I think it would be a pretty good place to start and have a bit of a look around and see what's happening. Okay, interesting. So we've got stories like this. Some of this stuff's from 8 days ago. These are just the top posts for that have the Ukraine tag. Um, let's see if we can go have a look at one of the subs. Okay, this is already extremely interesting. So we're just kind of having a bit of a gaze at this. I mean, this is interesting. There's a pretty strong frame on here already. Okay, so what do you think the frame is here? What's happening? This is very interesting. Okay. This is a completely different media environment to what we're seeing on other channels. Even Twitter is a bit different to this. The content here is pretty emotional, hey. Not in that it kind of makes you, I don't know, like cry or whatever, but it's like the content that's trending in this subreddit is pretty, like it's kind of specifically designed to tug at your heartstrings, I think. Even this format's really interesting. We've got filming himself on a mobile phone. Zelensky states that Russian attack could trigger a catastrophic disaster. So this is interesting. So yeah, have a look at this. It's kind of interesting seeing the selfie video format. It frames the content quite nicely in that um, it's like the classic vlogger, right? And you've got this vlogging aesthetic. I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially younger people who are kind of used to seeing this style of delivery on everything from Instagram, TikTok, all the rest. Okay, let's have a look and see what's happening on mainstream media as well. We'll see if we can compare the two. Okay, worst days ahead. Nuclear power plant ablaze, 6 Chernobyls. It's a pretty big statement. Live update. So we've still got this live update aesthetic um, coming from the mainstream media. We discussed this before. I think it's time we get Telegram involved. We can start doing some comparisons here. So as you would have seen, this is the Conflict Observer Telegram channel. Now, okay. Something that's been interesting to this whole situation has been the holistic kind of totally, holistic's not the right word, but more homogenous response, almost unanimously from every aspect of the West in the um, condemnation of the attack, which I think that dynamic itself is kind of reflected in the media environment that we're seeing around it. there's kind of the way that a lot of this information is framed, it's really kind of pushing the end of days type um, narrative. There are a lot of similarities, I think, with what's happening here. Um, you can compare this quite closely with the reaction at the start of the pandemic. I think that would actually be a pretty accurate comparison to draw there, especially in the way that it's being um, handled by the media. It's kind of nothing was happening initially, like pre last week. There were the occasional reports, and it wasn't really taken seriously. And then the combination of the sanctions and the media reporting, it's kind of there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of panic and there's a lot of hysteria, I think, um, around this. Even this is interesting. Q&A host asked pro-Russian audience member to leave the studio after a Ukraine claim. So there's kind of becoming a fairly sanitized media environment from the perspective of legacy channels and even places like this on Reddit. The perception and the prevailing opinion definitely is that um, Ukraine are the underdogs, and that's kind of what I was getting at before. So it's taking me a bit to get on a roll here, but that's what I was getting at before with this kind of stuff, and this as well. Is there's definitely a frame being built where the Ukrainians are being they're being shown as kind of this heroic underdog, and you can see that with some of the stories that have actually been coming out in the last week around the war. So there's been a couple interesting um, examples of this with almost folk tales that have been created to help drive the narrative from the Ukrainian side. So we've got what have we got here for that? We've got the a couple of these that you'd know would be the Ghost of Kiev would be one. Um, the next one is the Snake Island stuff. And this is really interesting. So the Ghost of Kiev is a nickname given to a disputed and unconfirmed MiG-29 flying ace credited with shooting down 6 Russian planes. So the initial, okay, we've got DW doing a fact check on that. So the initial story here was that there was a mystery pilot who we can see in this video. Classic. That doesn't matter. There was a mystery pilot you could see in this video. There was apparently some Ukrainian flying ace that was shooting down Russian planes like it was going out of fashion. Now that has been disputed on many channels. Here we go. So apparently this is actually a sequence from the video game Digital Combat Simulator, which is interesting. So who's behind this kind of stuff? If this is fake, and the prevailing opinion online now is that it is actually incorrect, what's the point of this footage, and who's making it, and why does it exist? Well, there's some good answers we can get here. So these stories are obviously exist for kind of morale boosting purposes, right? That's pretty clear. Um, the question as to who is responsible we'll answer in a little bit because we're going to have a look at some content that I found during the week, and we'll do a bit of digging into some of the psychological operations that that can happen in a conflict like this. But this is interesting. So this is one of the folk stories, is the ghost of Kiev. Um, Snake Island is another one. So the story here was that there were 13 servicemen from Ukraine on an island. A Russian ship kind of asked them to surrender. They said to the ship to go fuck yourself, and then they got blown up and they died. But it was portrayed as some kind of heroic, um, heroic, almost martyrdom type victory for the soldiers of Ukraine and for the Ukrainian cause. Now, if we go and have a look at this article from The Guardian, so even Zelensky's here saying that the border guards died heroically. They may be alive. The 13 border guards died of refusing to surrender. Blah, blah, blah. In a recent statement posted on Facebook, State Border Guard Service, we have a strong belief all Ukrainian defenders may be alive. We're working on identifying our soldiers. Okay, so that's what you've got happening here, is that there's a kind of, it's interesting. So what does Telegram have to say about this? Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but there was some footage shared by one of the pro-Russian sources that popped up a few days, almost a day after that, actually to a T. Here we go. So this comes from Anna News, which I've used quite extensively in the past. They had a lot of great coverage. Um, yeah, they had a lot of great coverage. Far out, man. Shane Warne's dead. What? Sorry. Oh my God. Okay, we'll get to that later. Um, when did that happen? That's crazy. Yeah, okay. Anyway, back to it. So this info came out from Anna News, and they're a team that I've used some of their info before. They cover the war in Syria really quite well. And let's see what this caption says. This is definitely the video I was thinking of. So the Russian Ministry of Defense publishes a video of the surrender of Ukrainian border guards on Zimny Island. The Ukrainians surrendered without putting up resistance. It is noteworthy that earlier the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, said that the Ukrainian military stationed on the island refused to surrender and died heroically. Another myth of Ukrainian propaganda has been dispelled. This is really interesting. So you've got two completely opposing narratives here. You've got the narrative of these guys dying heroically, with kind of a bit of a fuck you to Russia, and then you've got some Russian channels saying that that is completely incorrect, and they are still alive. And this is supposed to be video footage of these guys. We'll see if we can translate this as well. Everything is fine, thank you. Special Forces and SBU servicemen from Zemeni Island, I can't say that, Zmeni, Snake Island, on the bus after a series of legal procedures. All 82 military men will be sent home. So here's video footage of this. So that's interesting. So this video kind of is supposed to be showing the defenders of Snake Island happy and healthy and on a bus. So it's hard. It's kind of hard to say exactly what's going on here. Then we come down. Then we come down to this. So this is a Russian Telegram channel. This is the translation here. So this pro-Russian Telegram channel is kind of obviously showing that there's been they view this info as a massive information attack. So we need to understand what kind of information background has now been created and continues to be created by the world's mainstream media. A woman who was injured during the destruction has been immediately photographed from all sides by professional photographers in blood, with and without bandages, left, right, front, and profile. In the morning, these photos are in most of the world's newspapers: Australia, Canada, Turkey, Belgium, Austria, UK, etc. So this channel's kind of calling for where's the media support from Russian media and where's the public relations, for lack of a better word, that is designed to kind of show this stuff. Um, so that's interesting. So even the pro-Russian channels on Telegram are kind of noticing that there's a massive and quite effective media campaign supporting the not supporting the oh, I guess it is supporting the Ukrainians, yeah. This kind of goes back to what we were speaking about last time with weaponized empathy, where you see these images and they're heartbreaking, and like a picture tells 1,000 words, right? And there's many such examples of this being used previously. What have we got here? There's a famous photo from Vietnam, which was kind of one of the photos that really threw public perception against the war. It's a girl covered in napalm kind of running down a street with no clothes on, US soldiers in the background. Let's see what that did. Bit of background. Became one of the most memorable images in the 20th century. No, it's not really giving us what we're looking for. That's okay. The point of this is it's interesting to see how a photograph like that can really change public perception. So we've got these kind of headlines popping up and these kind of images, right? Panic sweeps world as Russia attacks Ukraine. So there's like things are getting pretty serious. Is the gist of what this shows is that things are getting pretty serious. So what's interesting about this is a few days later, after these images kind of came out, there was some analysis done online. This is back to so this is some of the Reddit stuff I was speaking about earlier. Kind of like it really draws on the emotions, and there's also kind of wholesome positivity. Okay, another interesting media moment here is these are a lot of things on Twitter where they're saying that the president is fighting on the front lines, and they're saying that he's kind of in the thick of it and in the midst of all the action. Um, the Ukraine president is actually inspecting the border, and these photos come from September in 2021. So it's interesting how these photos here have been repurposed to kind of to be used. So what's the point of this? What does this do? Well, it kind of, first of all, it sets the frame that Zelensky is in the thick of it. And the way that this whole media environment's been set up from the beginning is that it's like kind of like the way that the Ukrainians are playing this, it's like almost like a piece of theater, right? It's being set up that he's a strong leader under the pump, and he's kind of in the trenches with his fellow soldiers and citizens, like doing whatever he can to defend the Ukrainian people. That's the frame that becomes set up by this type of information. So we'll keep scrolling down and we'll get to the thing I was looking at before. This is another interesting thing. More stuff on Twitter. Ukrainian soldiers leaving their loved ones to fight for their country. Heartbreaking. Um, and the photo or the video clip is actually from a film. So here we go. So this comes from Intel Slava, right? So it's difficult to say the legitimacy of this. Um, However, the proof is it's quite compelling. So here's the photo we saw before. Here's another photo of from a report on Twitter that showed an older lady kind of down in the trenches. And then here's a photo of what's called SIPSO, which we'll talk about in 1 second. So the implication here is that this person here is in fact this person here, which is in fact this person here. Now, why is this interesting? So in Ukraine, there's a unit called SIPSO, which is the Center for Information and Psychological Operations. Now, this is interesting because this is a military unit, and basically, these guys are involved in fighting a war not just on the battlefield, but also in the information battlefield as well. Actually, we don't need to do that. So I wrote a bit of a summary about this in our chat, and this makes sense that this is happening, right? Because Ukraine is definitely not the first country to kind of come up with this tactic. In fact, Russia have been quite good at deploying it as well, as are the United States and most Anglo militaries. It's kind of made up a significant portion of both funding and development. And it's called non-linear warfare, and it's kind of like asymmetric, right? Because it's not happening all in the one place. It's not happening. It's a war that's happening in the physical world and also in the world of the mind. So this is a really interesting piece on how Russia's deployed these tactics previously as well. These are the psychological operations units that are currently in action. So we have 4 units. We have 4 units in action throughout Ukraine, and they are currently under the training of, I believe, the 77th Special Forces unit from the United Kingdom. Let me just fact check that. This looks right. So these guys use unorthodox tactics. Um, and this is interesting because basically what this means is that we're in a media environment at the moment where all the information that's coming out could be a result of operations like this, whether it's from the Ukrainian side or whether it's kind of coming from the Russians as well. So it's something that's kind of really important to keep in mind as to why this is happening and what it means. And it's important to remember that the West is not immune from this. I mean, one of the great, um, the founding kind of principles of the legacy media, right, is that it's like what's the New York Times saying is all the news that's fit to print. Um, and that basically means that they're kind of picking and choosing news stories that are based on merit, right? So there's the implication from that is the things that are being published are kind of true and correct and are in the public interest. But that would be awesome if that was true all the time. But I think it's fair to say that we're in a media environment now where understanding the truth is becoming more and more difficult, especially when the war is taking place, not just on the front of the conflict on the front lines, but it's also taking place in the information space. And why is this important? Well, let's have a look at how much Ukraine has raised internationally as a result. Crypto investors alone have raised more than 30 million. £1 million coming from the UK. In fact, I actually saw an article just before that was speaking about how Ukraine is now going to be selling NFTs, like non-fungible crypto tokens, and pieces of art as a way to try and raise even more money. These guys are launching a 30 million Ukraine war fundraiser. Let's see if we can find the. This is from the Financial Times. Apparently, the move is the latest sign of the Ukrainian government embracing digital assets as a way to fund its armed forces, and comes after it's raised more than 270 million in war bonds. So the reason that these information campaigns are kind of interesting and I guess necessary from this perspective is that if you can get public perception on side, um, it becomes achievable to start raising significant amounts of cash. I can't read that. That's okay. So that's something to think about. Anyway, that's just kind of a brief overview of some of the media things that we've been picking up on in the last few days. Come back over the weekend and we'll explore it a bit further. Thanks for watching.